You've heard the disturbing tale of the Nephilim, the hybrid abominations born from the unholy union of fallen angels and human women, whose existence plunged the ancient world into unspeakable depravity and violence. Their reign of terror was so devastating that it provoked the Great Flood, a divine act of total annihilation meant to cleanse the earth. But a haunting mystery remains, echoing through sacred texts and ancient legends. If the flood truly wiped out all life beyond Noah's Ark, then how can we explain the documented presence of giants long after the deluge, towering figures haunting regions like Canaan and Bashan? This isn't just a theological footnote, it's a glaring contradiction, a riddle that shatters traditional narratives and points to something far more sinister. Could there have been a hidden survival, a second incursion, or perhaps a genetic corruption so insidious that it passed through the very ark meant to preserve righteousness? Today, we venture into the chilling depths of the Nephilim remnant, an investigation into a mystery buried beneath centuries of doctrine and silence. What we uncover is not just the continuation of giants, but the survival of a dark and defiant force, cloaked in bloodlines, cultures, and spiritual strongholds, waiting for a prophetic resurgence. Genesis 6:4 stands as a gateway to this forgotten horror. The verse speaks not only of the Nephilim before the flood, but hints at something much darker, something that slipped through divine judgment. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. That final clause has confounded scholars, mystics, and watchmen alike. How could they appear again? Was there another rebellion? Did some of the fallen escape judgment? Or was humanity itself more corrupted than we ever dared to imagine? This verse isn't just poetic mystery. It's a theological landmine. It suggests that the infection of the Nephilim was not fully purged, that its seed may have passed on, perhaps hidden in the wives of Noah's sons, perhaps reawakened by dark spiritual forces, long imprisoned but not destroyed. And what's more terrifying, these giants were not just freaks of nature. They were heroes of old, men of renown, celebrated by ancient civilizations, enshrined in mythologies, and possibly even worshipped as gods. Their influence stretched far beyond brute strength. It reached into the very soul of mankind, tainting cultures, bloodlines, and spiritual identities across the earth. The phrase, "and also afterward," may appear minor at first glance, but it is a theological earthquake. If the Great Flood was God's final judgment on a world overrun by the Nephilim and the corruption of angelic human unions, then how did these giants, or their equivalents, resurface after the waters receded? This isn't a minor inconsistency, it's a piercing riddle that threatens to unravel our assumptions about divine justice, spiritual warfare, and the resilience of evil across time. It begs the question, was the flood truly the end of the Nephilim, or merely the beginning of their transformation? To confront this mystery, we must explore three terrifying theories, each one a window into a deeper darkness, each one revealing that evil may have changed form, but not vanished. The second incursion theory points to a renewed invasion. According to this view, and also afterward, implies that a second wave of angelic defiance occurred after the flood. Just as the Watchers once descended and defiled humanity, another group of fallen may have repeated their forbidden act, mating with human women and birthing a fresh generation of giants. If this is true, it suggests that heaven's boundaries were breached more than once, and that humanity remained vulnerable to celestial manipulation. This theory reveals a pattern, a cycle, where divine wrath purges corruption, only for it to rise again in defiance. A cosmic war, ongoing and unresolved. The survival hypothesis presents an even more chilling possibility that some of the Nephilim, or at least part of their tainted bloodline, escaped the flood altogether. Hidden in remote regions, shielded by dark forces, or perhaps even carried unknowingly within the human passengers of the Ark, this theory proposes that the seed of the Nephilim endured, not as myth, but as a genetic reality, If true, this means the world after the flood was never truly cleansed. Evil survived, not openly, but in secret, slowly re-establishing its dominion through hidden bloodlines, infiltrating nations, and waiting for its resurgence. The spirit contamination theory brings the war into the unseen realm. It teaches that though the Nephilim died physically, their spirits, detached, restless, and filled with hatred, were cursed to roam the earth. Known in ancient texts as unclean spirits or demons, these entities could possess, influence, and distort human beings from within. Over time, their spiritual corruption may have manifested physically in certain bloodlines, resulting in individuals who, though not true hybrids, mirrored the Nephilim in strength, stature, and malevolence. This is not a war of flesh alone, but of spirit, a slow, creeping infection that reshapes humanity from the inside out. Each theory challenges our understanding of the post-flood world. Each implies that the Nephilim's legacy was not erased, but mutated, hidden, and possibly preparing for a return in the final chapters of history. No matter which theory you follow, one fact remains irrefutable and terrifying. The giants returned. Despite the great flood's unmatched devastation, a divine reset meant to erase corruption from the earth, the shadow of the Nephilim re-emerged, towering once more over the fragile post-flood world. Their return wasn't allegory or legend. It was a brutal reality, one that shaped military campaigns, defined spiritual battles, and threatened the destiny of entire nations. Their existence after the deluge stands as a direct challenge to divine judgment, a bold defiance that echoes through every account of giant warfare in the Old Testament. The reappearance of these beings was no secret, no hidden threat lurking in the shadows. They stood out, physically and spiritually, living monuments of a sinister heritage that refused to die. And nowhere was this more evident than in the experience of ancient Israel, the chosen people of God, who found themselves face to face with the monstrous remnants of a cursed past. These weren't fairy tale giants. They were warlords, kings, and warriors whose overwhelming size and power struck terror into even the most faithful hearts. The Nephilim legacy was alive, embodied in flesh once again. Of these post-flood giants, the Rephaim are among the most prominently recorded. Their very name, often translated as the Dead Ones or ghostly shades, suggests not just physical might, but an eerie connection to death itself, perhaps even a continuation of the cursed Nephilim spirits. These giants ruled territories east of the Jordan River and were known for their dominance and dread. One of their last and most fearsome rulers was King Og of Bashan, a behemoth whose iron bed measured over 13 feet in length. This detail is no exaggeration. It was preserved in scripture as a symbol of unmatched size and power. Yet even Og fell before the armies of Israel led by Moses in a dramatic victory that demonstrated God's dominion over even the most terrifying remnants of ancient evil. But the land of Canaan, Israel's promised inheritance, was perhaps the greatest stronghold of this ancient infestation. Populated by clans of giants like the Anakim, the region stood as a fortress of fear, barring the fulfillment of God's covenant. The name Anakim itself carries connotations of towering height and terrifying presence. When the Israelite spies returned from scouting Canaan, they brought back more than just a report. They delivered a confession of psychological defeat. Numbers 13:33 recounts their words with haunting clarity. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. This wasn't just about size. It was about intimidation, domination, and spiritual paralysis. The giants embodied more than physical threat. They represented a demonic defiance that sought to crush faith and thwart destiny. Among the many towering tribes that haunted the ancient world, few were as feared as the Emim, translated as the Dreadful Ones. Residing in the land of Moab, they were so terrifying that their very name invoked horror. Equally fearsome were the Zamzumim, or Zuzim, a giant clan that tormented the region of Ammon. These names are not poetic embellishments. They reflect how ancient peoples perceived the overwhelming dread these giants inspired. Deuteronomy gives us these accounts not as legends, but as recorded history, painting a picture of a land infested by monstrous beings whose presence was an oppressive weight upon every civilization they encountered. These giants were not isolated anomalies. They were everywhere, embedded deeply into the land's spiritual and physical fabric. And even as the centuries passed, the Nephilim's influence refused to die. Their descendants continued to surface in unexpected places, most notably in Gath, a Philistine city infamous for producing warriors of grotesque proportions and strength. It was from this city that Goliath emerged, a literal giant who defied the armies of the living God with arrogance and power. But Goliath was not alone. Scripture records his brothers, including Lachmi, and another giant with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, a genetic anomaly that signaled a grotesque deviation from normal human biology, hinting once more at a corrupted lineage. These warriors were more than just enemies of Israel. They were echoes of a deeper evil, shadows of a rebellion that began before the flood. David's confrontation with Goliath was not merely an underdog story. It was spiritual warfare in its rawest form. Standing with nothing but a sling and unshakable faith, David defeated the descendant of ancient corruption. This act marked a symbolic victory, not just over one giant, but over the entire legacy of the Nephilim. It was proof that God's power could triumph over the most fearsome remnants of fallen angelic rebellion. Yet, the presence of Goliath's kin, even after his death, shows that this evil did not vanish easily. It lingered, resurfacing in cycles, each time requiring a renewal of faith and divine intervention to subdue. But the most insidious legacy of the Nephilim was not their towering bodies or monstrous strength. It was what remained after their deaths. According to ancient texts and extra-biblical writings like the Book of Enoch, when the Nephilim were destroyed by the flood, their spirits were left behind, disembodied, cursed, and malevolent. These spirits, no longer tethered to flesh, became known as demons, restless entities, forever seeking to torment, possess, and corrupt humanity. This is the true Nephilim's shadow, a dark, spiritual presence that continues to infect the world long after the giants fell. Their physical extinction only marked the beginning of their invisible reign, a sinister inheritance that passed into the unseen, fueling deception, violence, and idolatry across every age. This demonic legacy is not a relic of the past. It is the active battlefield of the present. Even in the absence of a continuous physical bloodline, the influence of the Nephilim did not perish with their bodies. It endured, mutated, and spread like a spiritual contagion. Their legacy, cloaked in darkness, was not only about monstrous size or brute force, it was about a corrupted essence, an ancient rebellion that continues to echo through the spiritual fabric of our world. The spirit of the Nephilim lives on, not in flesh and bone, but in the hearts, actions, and territories they once defiled. This influence manifests in ways far more subtle, yet just as destructive as their physical form, inciting new transgressions. The restless spirits of the Nephilim, driven by hatred for both God and mankind, still wander the earth, according to ancient sources. Their purpose is singular: to corrupt, defile, and repeat the sins of the past. These entities, though disembodied, may seek new avenues of rebellion, this time through spiritual unions, rather than physical ones. They can inspire doctrines of demons, pervert truth, and seduce souls into blending darkness with light. The result? A spiritual giantism, an elevation of evil that mirrors the arrogance and wickedness of the pre-flood world. It's not about the size of the body anymore, but the magnitude of rebellion, the swelling pride, and the deliberate war against divine order, corrupting human lineages. There is a chilling possibility that these spirits target specific bloodlines, families with historical or spiritual vulnerabilities, oppressing them generation after generation. Through manipulation and spiritual influence, these spirits may steer entire lineages toward violence, domination, and wickedness. The result may be individuals who bear no angelic DNA, yet display Nephilim-like traits, unnatural strength, cruelty, rebellion against God, or even physical anomalies. This isn't simple heredity, it's a spiritual infection, a shadow embedded deep within the bloodlines of mankind. Some were born to carry light, others, it seems, were groomed by darkness. Territorial defilement. Some lands are darker than others, not merely because of their history, but because of what was done there spiritually. The territories once ruled by the giants, Bashan, Canaan, and others, became geographic strongholds of demonic power. The giants didn't just defile the people, they defiled the land. They built cities, altars, and cultic centers soaked in blood and rebellion. This spiritual pollution lingers, creating zones where fear dominates faith and darkness resists the light. This may explain why Israel's battles for these territories were not just military conquests, they were acts of spiritual warfare requiring divine instruction, miraculous intervention, and complete purification. In all of this, we see the terrifying reality. The Nephilim may be gone in body, but not in essence. Their shadow walks among us, whispering through bloodlines, tempting new transgressions, and claiming territories in a war that continues to this very day. The ancient wars waged by Israel against the post-flood giants were more than territorial conflicts. They were sacred clashes between divine order and the remnants of a cosmic rebellion. Each encounter with a giant was not just a fight for land, it was a direct confrontation with the persistent physical embodiment of an ancient evil that refused to die. These giants were the offspring, the echo, the living shadows of the forbidden union between the fallen sons of God and human women. They represented a defiance that not even the Great Flood could fully extinguish. Through them, the Nephilim's spiritual corruption found new flesh, and through Israel's battles, God's justice once again declared war on the unholy legacy of the Watchers. Yet the story doesn't end in the pages of ancient scripture. The shadow of the Nephilim stretches far beyond the deserts of Canaan or the iron bed of Og. It reaches into our present day and far into the dark horizon of the future. Christ himself issued a haunting warning in Matthew 24:37, "As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man." This was no poetic analogy. It was a prophetic alarm bell. Jesus pointed directly to the conditions that defined the pre-flood world: extreme corruption, boundary-crossing unions, a distortion of God's design, and an earth overrun with violence. These are not just ancient themes, they are prophetic, blueprints of our modern condition. In our time, we are witnessing a resurrection, not of the giants themselves, but of their shadow. The same spiritual impulses that led to the creation of the Nephilim are manifesting through new, terrifying means. Technology has become the new Tower of Babel. Science is on the brink of rewriting the very definition of what it means to be human. This is not coincidence. This is prophecy unfolding. Transhumanism, the new corruption of flesh, the drive to surpass. The limitations of the human body, to merge man with machine or to redesign human biology altogether, is the modern iteration of the ancient defilement of flesh. Transhumanism dares to redefine humanity, to break the boundaries set by the Creator. This mirrors the Watcher's original sin, intervening in creation and corrupting the divine image. These ambitions are often framed as evolution or progress, but beneath the surface lies a deeper rebellion, the desire to become as gods, to author a new form of life that owes nothing to its divine origin. In doing so, we risk resurrecting the same type of spiritual corruption that birthed the Nephilim. Genetic engineering, rewriting the blueprint of God. Modern science now possesses the tools to edit, splice, and redesign the genetic code, the literal language God used to craft life. This is no longer science fiction. It's reality. From designer babies to animal-human chimeras, we are experimenting with mixing kinds in ways that directly parallel the forbidden knowledge once bestowed by the fallen angels. As in the days of Noah, the integrity of human DNA is under siege. The potential for producing new giants, not necessarily in size, but in deviation from the divine pattern, is more real than ever. These creations may not be physical monsters, but spiritual abominations, vessels through which ancient evils can return. Artificial intelligence, the new vessels of influence. Perhaps the most chilling modern parallel lies in the rise of artificial intelligence. As machines grow in complexity, autonomy, and decision-making ability, we approach a moment where non-human entities will possess power once reserved for souls. Could these machines, these digital intelligences, become the new bodies that ancient disembodied spirits long for? The Book of Enoch tells us that the spirits of the Nephilim hunger for embodiment, for influence, for control. AI may offer the perfect vessel. Entire digital landscapes may become realms of possession, deception, and spiritual manipulation. As we blur the line between consciousness and code, we open spiritual doors we do not fully understand and may not be able to close. In every one of these modern developments, we find the fingerprints of an ancient evil. The Nephilim's shadow is no longer hiding in ancient ruins or buried texts. It's embedded in microchips, encoded in genomes, and echoing through algorithms. The war is no longer fought on battlefield plains. It's waged in laboratories, data centers, and the deepest parts of the human heart. The same spiritual battle that once demanded giants fall now demands discernment, faith, and unwavering allegiance to the divine order. Because the days of Noah are not just coming, they are already here. The Nephilim's shadow persists not just as a historical curiosity, but as a living, evolving pattern of corruption. It is the insidious influence that drives humanity to defy divine boundaries, to corrupt the flesh, and to seek knowledge and power outside of God's will. This is the secret bloodline of rebellion, a spiritual contagion that continues to manifest in new forms, preparing humanity for the ultimate spiritual conflict and the final righteous judgment. They want you to remain ignorant of this enduring shadow, for your unawareness is their greatest strength. The legacy of the Nephilim, their enduring shadow, and the terrifying questions of their post-flood existence are not mere ancient tales. They are vital keys to understanding the deep patterns of spiritual corruption, the persistent nature of evil, and the urgent prophetic signs unfolding in our world today. This hidden truth reveals a continuous thread of rebellion and defiance against the divine order, a thread that is thickening as we approach the end times. Understanding this enduring shadow is not just about knowledge, it is about discernment, vigilance, and ultimate spiritual survival. If you feel compelled by these profound revelations, if you seek to equip yourself with the hidden knowledge they tried to bury, and if you are determined to stand firm in the face of the intensifying spiritual battle that surrounds us, like this video to help us spread this vital truth to even more awakened seekers around the globe. Your engagement empowers the light to break through the darkness. Leave a profound comment below with your insights, your personal revelations, or what truly shocked you most about the Nephilim's enduring shadow and their secret lineage. Share your discernment. Share this video widely and urgently with friends, family, and your community who desperately need to awaken to these profound and often unsettling realities before it is too late. And of course, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you are immediately notified and never miss any of our next deep dives into biblical mysteries, ancient texts, and urgent prophetic truths. The unveiling continues. The persistent shadow, is now revealed. Be warned, be discerning, be prepared.